Who doesn't know who Shahid is? They know him by now.
He's the linchpin.
Shahid is the backbone of this conference. No, quite honestly, I'm excited to hear from Shahid myself. A few years ago, Shahid and I were sitting down. I think it was actually in the HIMSS press room or something. That was when we first met too. It was in the press room, and so we started discussing. And I brought up this concept of influencers, and Shahid made me realize that I can't own every blog that has influence. And as much as I may desire so, from that, we started discussing, and I looked at some of the blogs and I said, wow, they could do so much more than they're doing. They're not realizing their potential. And so we had this discussion, and so that's where really the company Influential Networks was born. That there's all these influencers and bloggers in the healthcare IT space that could do a lot more than they were doing. And so together we put together Influential Networks, which is a network of 30-something influential blogs and bloggers and influencers. And so that's how we started our partnership, and now we've grown it to another brand called Physio, doing physician websites and a few other projects. And then of course we collaborated on this event to do it. And I'll tell you, I feel lucky to be his partner. On sales calls or other calls that we do, I like to just sit back and learn myself. So you guys will have that opportunity today to hear from one of the greatest minds in healthcare IT, Shahid Shah.
All right. Hopefully I can live up to that expectation now. Thank you very much. So what I wanted to do today was, I like to do things differently, so instead of a general lecture format or the interactive panel format, I wanted to do this kind of like a workshop. And so we've got a lot of influencers in the room, so there's no way that I'm the only one that's going to be able to talk about this topic and provide input. So we're going to go through these, I do have some slides. Normally I don't like doing PowerPoint only. But the reason why I have the PowerPoint up is we're going to take notes up here. There's going to be homework assignments given as I'm talking, so you guys are going to talk back really quickly. Because this problem of reaching influencers is already bad and it's getting worse simply because there's more people who want to reach influencers than there are influencers, and as the influencers get more influential, they care less and less about everyone who is not influential. And that's not always true necessarily, but it certainly seems that way because we're trying to reach out to them and more people are coming in. So what I wanted to really just start off with first is, and you'll see on my slides here, my portion is on the left, and then we've got portions for you guys on the right on most of these slides as I run through them. So the first question always that comes to mind is, what the heck are we trying to influence? So is it you're trying to get a promotion? Is that what we're really trying to influence? Are we trying to influence sharing? Are we trying to influence buying? What do you guys think? Is when you think of reaching an influencer, why? Why do we want to reach those influencers? Just throw some stuff out.
Recommend your products.
Great. All right, so
Share.
awesome.
Credibility.
Leadership. Amplify your message.
I think bring people up to speed. The education and training.
Perfect. Did I miss somebody's? Wasn't happy fast enough.
I said knowledge, but that is there.
Great.
Well, same thing with ideas.
Ideas, okay. Did I miss anybody else?
News.
Say that again?
News.
News. So great. Now, what we see here is there absolutely cannot be one approach to doing all of this. So fundamentally, when we're trying to reach influencers, what's cool about this exercise is not the fact that we're here today, but the exercise of reaching influencers allows us to step back and say, if I can get the influencers, we know that we can get the audience. One of the things to recognize is that the influencer, if he actually is a real influencer, he is a member of your actual audience. So as people reach out to me or John or other influencers in this room, we probably have tons of anecdotes just from email this morning where somebody says, hey, can you post my article, can you do this link, etc. And the answer almost always is hell no, right? Because you didn't even do a basic analysis about why you're trying to reach out to me. And if you think back, everything that we learned yesterday and today, while somewhat obvious, just has to be beaten into our heads all the time. And when I say our, I mean mine as well, because we, like for example, in order to get you guys to come out to this conference, we had to market to you as our audience. We had to get sponsors to line up, we had to get folks to come in, we have to get people on video watching live, and then we're going to have to post-production, do all the post-production to get this up on our site. So we had the exact same problems that you guys had, which is how do you get out to the influencers? So the first question in this strategy, and you heard that a combined strategy is very, very good. I think that's great advice. But when you first think about your strategy, especially with influencers, you should be spending like 60% of your time here. What is it that I'm looking to do? And getting influential tweets or whatever isn't the outcome, but something else is. And you saw that we just came up with this in 30 seconds. It's going to be a lot deeper and a lot more important to do this sitting with your senior executives, etc. This is reaching out to influencers is not a marketing problem. It is a corporate problem, and that strategy that you're trying to get established, when, like for example, a CEO of another company reaches out to me and says, could you do X? I'm more likely to do it, because I'm the CEO of a company. Now, that's not to say that, that marketing doesn't get attention or PR doesn't get attention. It does, but in a completely different way. So as you start to look through the influence what, notice what I put on the left versus what you guys put on the right. There's a ton more of this, and we can certainly, as we go through the workshop, add to this. So now the next question comes up. Why do we need the influencers? I mean, what is keeping us from either being an influencer ourselves or doing all of this on our own? So I started out listing some of the things that I think. So a lot of folks ask us, as influencers, to ideate around their content. And that's typically, it's probably a better ask to just, say, hey, may I pick your brain for 5 minutes? Because there's a ton of stuff that you guys can do better than we can. But what you can't do necessarily is to tie the content of what you're doing. Like we were just having a great conversation about a company here represented by one of the agencies where there are things that this company is going to see as problems 3 to 6 months from now that company will not see, but I as an influencer do see because I'm seeing other companies talking about those same topics. So think about that in some reasonable way and say, ideating around content and what is it that I should be focused on, and not just tonight and next week, but because it takes so long to reach influencers, you have to be ideating with them about what to do 3 months from now, 6 months from now. And one of the best ways to do that is look at ideation at an event. So if you're going to get 5 minutes with an influencer at HIMSS, you're going to get 10 minutes at another conference, don't take it up on talking about what you've done in the past. Ask about your clients. I think if either yourself as the company or your clients, and say, here's the business that they're in, these are the challenges that they're facing. How do you recommend that we get around some of these challenges? How do you recommend that we talk to the CEO of a client? Because remember, your client's biggest problem is not marketing. Their biggest problem is growing top-line revenue and improving margins. Period. There is no other problem that they have that they can't find someone else to solve. Right? So if you are helping them with those two principal problems, so me as a CEO, every morning I wake up, my only two problems are how do I grow top-line revenue and how do I maintain or improve margins. Anyone that is helping me with that problem gets attention that day. If you're not, I mean, as an influencer, I'll read a bunch of stuff, etc., but that's how you cut through the chase. So if you're cutting through the noise and you're saying, okay, how do I ideate around content? And let's say you now know me. I just told you what my two problems, that's what I wake up doing every morning. If that's what you've figured out about your customer, about where you're going, then you can ask influencers around ideating content. The other thing is qualifying content. So often you can ask and say, hey, I'm about to write an article on X. How useful might that be? I'm about to go to an event to speak at it. Do you think that that's valuable? Now, one of the dangers, of course, is using what we call, in statistics and math, we say, if something is an n of 1, it just means that you didn't do proper stats, right? So if I'm the only influencer you're talking to and you're following advice, that's just crazy, right? But if you have a pool of them, and you've reached out and you've got relationships, which we'll talk about here in a second, that's okay. Qualify the content. So imagine what you can do in 2 minutes or 5 minutes of someone's time, because then it means that you're not making me read an entire article. You're just posting, you're asking me a specific question. And this can be tweeted, emailed, etc. to say, I'm qualifying something, I'm having you comment on it, rather than getting you to do extra work. The third thing is contextualizing content. This is really important. An influencer who is truly an influencer can help you understand your market in ways that you couldn't understand on your own. So I'll give you some examples. If you have CDW Healthcare. They create an enormous amount of content around all kinds of IT. But if they can't contextualize it in healthcare, their healthcare market just doesn't give a damn, nor should they. Nor should they give any serious credence to anybody who doesn't contextualize. So that's one area where influencers might be able to help you quite a bit, is to say, I've got an idea. I mean, we've done this for lots of big companies where they come in, they're trying to sell a printer or a scanner, or, what do these have to do with healthcare? But they do, right? A fax machine is the freaking backbone of every healthcare environment. They cannot live without it. If you came to me and said, I'd like to sell fax machines into healthcare, I can contextualize that all day long. Even though it's not sexy, you can contextualize it, right? Because then you can figure out what it is need for. So as you're trying to say, why do you need influencers? And you say, well, could I ask you a question to either qualify something or ideate? I don't understand, I need a new idea, etc. But sometimes that contextualization, how do you apply something from industry A to industry B? Like as an influencer, I work in 4 different industries. So that doesn't make me any smarter, it just means that I have clients in multiple industries. If you ask me a question, many times I may not know how we do it in healthcare, but I know how we do it on the government side or on the medical devices side, and I can say, hey, apply this here or apply that there. So as you're looking for influencers, look for that. Is there an influencer that does work in healthcare, certainly healthcare IT, but in any other industry, in avionics, in nuclear, things that are important, right? In life and death. I mean, consumer type, you get a lot of people that give you advice about consumer, because we are all consumers and we all assume we're experts in consumer marketing, and none of us really are. It's a very hard business to work in. But the influencers that are doing things in multiple industries, you'll often find them very, very helpful in this area of contextualizing the information from one industry to the other, and that's actually quite useful. Now, in many cases, we want the influencer to create the content, and this is our biggest failing, right? If you're coming out and asking any one of us as influencers to say, can you create my content for me, and I'm talking about earned, this is the hardest thing to do. But imagine that you've already reached out to me about helping me ideate, about asking me to qualify, about asking me to contextualize. By this time, I know you. You've asked a few questions, we've tweeted a few times, etc. And now you ask me to say, you're not going to come out and say this, hey, Shahid, can you go create some content? But you will say, I'm covering company X, would you do an interview for the CEO? That's creating content. Even though you don't know, in my mind, that's work. You just asked me to spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours coordinating time. Just the idea, the thing that freaks me out most is when somebody asks for an interview. Just the idea of coordinating the schedule for an interview for an influencer is mind-bogglingly difficult because we get so many of them. So when you look at this create content, think about everything you're asking and at what point could you have done the prep work for it. If you send me 10 interview questions and those interview questions are already filled out, and then let me pick and say, oh, this is, okay, I can see what this guy might, where this guy might be useful. I can now contextualize and qualify it and say, you know what? I do want to talk to this guy, which I do often. I'm not saying that I don't take interviews. I do them routinely, but only for places where the prep work has already generally been done, where I don't have to come up with it, etc. Now, those of us that are true influencers know our industry cold. We can run interviews like this. It's not that hard to do. The question is, do we care enough to do it? So the fourth bullet here seems innocuous, but it's a killer because we don't think about it. And when I say we, remember, in order to do this conference or other places where we do marketing, in one aspect I'm an influencer, but in another aspect I'm just a marketer like everybody else. I need attention from other influencers, etc., to be able to do my job as well. And that's the one that I'm most careful about, is am I asking anything in which the mind of that influencer is going to say, holy shit, this guy's asking me to do some work. Why would I do that? Right? That's what you have to think about. Distribution venues. Why not just use why not just ask me to say, where's the best place to post this blog? That's an awesome question, because you're asking me for advice. Everybody loves being asked for advice. And I may look at that and say, dude, my blog is the best place for you to post it. And then you've won. You've won both ways. Either I'm going to tell you the best place to put it, or I'm just going to say, hey, I'm going to post it because it's a great place to do it. So this is not about tricking people. It's about really figuring out why you need the influencer. Distributing the content. Now, this is interesting because in many cases, people will reach out for guest articles, guest posts, etc., which in general we welcome. Pressing the button and distributing on Twitter or LinkedIn, etc., are all pretty easy. So this is one of those that is fairly innocuous, where you say, hey, I'd like to distribute it. The problem is why you're asking to distribute it. So in many cases, it's an interview about, this is some of the craziest ones I get is, somebody in my company just got promoted, could you talk about it? Why the hell do I care about anybody in your company getting promoted about anything? It doesn't matter. I mean, this is where the scenarios get really crazy, is people talk about themselves and hope that some influencer is going to write about themselves. No, right? If you have just won a client, maybe I'll think about it if the client happens to be somebody in my industry or whatever. But there are a lot of silly things, and there's actually a very nice tiny little book. It's called So What? Just the name of the book, just says So What? And you should ask yourself, if you're asking about anything to an influencer, you ask yourself at the end and say, so what? What is that influencer going to think about it? It'll give you a little bit of pause in some cases. And the last one is amplifying existing distribution. We find this probably the easiest to do. So if you quantify this, right? Those of us that are sophisticated in this market, we've been doing this for a long time. Like John is actually very nice. He doesn't actually respond back and say, this is just bullshit, I'm not doing it, right? He'll just say, hey, it'd be better if you do this, it'd be better if you do that. I'm from Texas. I grew up in Texas. I was born in Pakistan, rough area as well. And one of the things that I love doing is being completely honest to somebody sending me an email. If somebody sends me an email about a guest posting, and it looks like they've not done any research whatsoever, I will tell them, have you just looked at my blog? What the heck? So there are people that ask me, I'm at healthcareguy.com, my principal audience is other technical people building products, architects, engineers, CTOs, CIOs, etc. If you send me an article about how to get nursing training, that's not a good thing to do, right? And then that seems obvious, but it's fairly routine. We get them because there are blasts that go out to influencers and hoping that they're going to write about it. So just in this case of amplifying distribution, even in this case, if you're going to ask me to amplify the distribution for reach or engagement or general amplification, tell me why. Why should I amplify the message for the audience that I'm with? And we're not going to talk about audience too much because you guys, especially the last one talked about blogs and the audiences. But now, I'd like for you guys to jump in. What do you think you need influencers for that maybe I didn't think about here, and how we can reach them?
I don't tell influencers how to do PR. I'm not gonna, have them. They're the experts.
Yeah.
I'm entrenched in what I do in PR. I am certainly not entrenched in what it is they do. They have the credibility, the leverage, they live it. That's why we're going for them in the first place.
Yeah, that's great. So making sure that they're doing things that it is not your job. Right? So letting them do their job, letting you do your job. Other ideas? Did I cover most of this stuff pretty well? Did I miss anything? This is one of those areas, again, to me, I am an influencer, but I also use a lot of influencers. So to me, I play both sides, and I try to be as cognizant of that as possible.
I think you need influencers because you want them to help you enroll people in your big idea, whatever
Okay.
it is.
So promote the idea. Great.
I think they can also help you vet the big idea.
Awesome. Vetting ideas, yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean by qualify. So vetting, qualifying, contextualizing, and as you start to think about these influencers, pull back and say, what can I do in 10 seconds or 30 seconds or 1 minute rather than 15 minutes and 30 minutes and an hour? You ask me for an interview, the general answer will almost be no. Because, it has to be somebody really important. But you ask me to vet something, say, hey, do you think this is a good idea? I'd be crazy not to respond to that, because that gives me ideas. When people send ideas to influencers, they ping that and promote that. So think about what are other things that you could use them for. 30 seconds here, a minute there, 2 minutes there, that might help you guys out. Anything else?
Vetting a new segment.
Vetting
a new segment.
A new segment, okay, cool.
Is this really truly a new segment? Are you hearing this pain point that we are? That's really helpful.
Great, great. So as you can see, we've now got 3 or 4 ideas around contextualizing, qualifying, vetting. So that seems to be something that's resonating.
I was just gonna say, this seems to be the process we follow when we're vetting analysts. But I think we don't carry the same principles necessarily into the media, and it's really treating them the same as seems like you're talking about.
Yeah, that's a great point. And in fact, and some of this really boils down to respecting the person that you're asking to do something, right? I mean, if you made this something, what would my mom tell me to do? If you respect the person on the other end, whether it's a phone line or email or tweet, you think of them in the human-to-human capacity, you won't do some of the things that we do, right? And we're all guilty of it. I mean, I might shoot off, even if it's a friend of mine, like John, I might shoot him off an email saying, hey, could you do this for me? And then I have to say, why? Was John just sitting around waiting for things to us? No, of course not. And that is a tricky part. Now, what's weird about being an influencer, those of you in the audience that feel this as well, is and this happens to us, is you show up at an event and people know you, because if you're social and you're out there, people know you. You don't really know them very well. But so there is this, it's a weird scenario where they know you a lot better than you know them, and they should, and you guys should absolutely feel very comfortable to ask us to do things, but oftentimes we think and we're saying, dude, I don't know you. What are you asking me to do things for you for? And that as you look at these here, you start to say, okay, how do I trim this down into a quick request, something small, meaningful to me, as well as not bothersome to them? I think you'll see that working out pretty well. Other reasons we might want influencers? Go ahead.
I think it kind of helps to put a more human touch on the concept of the material.
Great. So adding a more human touch. Now, in these cases, how many of you have tried to reach out to an influencer, just out of curiosity? Yeah, I bet you the other side of the room also probably has done a bunch. And now in these cases, just anecdotally, are there things that you learned the hard way that you'd like to share about not doing in these cases? Is to say, I thought I needed them, but it turns out no, they're not going to do it, or they're not going to be helpful. Any quick anecdotes, bad stories? You can name names, it's okay. If you sent me stuff and I ignored it, I'm one of those guys who we have so I'm obsessive compulsive about replying to emails, which means if I get an email and I don't reply to it, I feel bad. So there are a lot of influencers like that. In fact, many of us are OCD and we want to reply to everybody. So are there times when you thought that you should have gotten a reply that you didn't, or any stories like that?
I have one with not a non-reply, but a negative reply to an idea, a campaign idea. And again, it was that lesson of a sample size of one, because in the end, the campaign ended up being successful.
Right.
And just because Aunt Minnie didn't like it, didn't mean it was a good campaign.
That's a great point, yeah. That is a great point. And in fact, many of us on the influencer side, we get full of ourselves. And it's really weird because we get asked all the time, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? There's a level of self-importance that comes in, which the other side, like you guys, need to be very careful about in that N of one. And even when you look at influencers, as tiny as healthcare IT is, it's literally a niche within niches, there are still many of us, right? So having that greater than, in fact, it's much nicer to say, hey Shahid, I talked to John Lynn, he said X, what do you think about this? in many cases, I might just say, hey, yeah, John knows this area better. I don't know it well, but I like it. Or I might say, no, I just completely disagree with him. I don't like I think this is a bad idea. Now it gives you an N of 2. Then you go to the third one, and the fourth one, and the fifth one. This requires work, right? You can't press a blast button in this model here, which means there's more work. And if you're reaching out to influencers and it doesn't feel like hard work, you're probably not doing it right. You're not going to get a whole lot of response back. Right? Okay, so now the big question is, what is an influencer? And this, I just want to open up some thoughts here. I put the one on the right because there is a general sense now, and especially because you heard in the last session that blogging is still important. I'm a firm believer that it doesn't matter what happens in social, long form blogging, articles, good content in long form is not going anywhere. So in fact, if you actually did studies of what our customers read rather than what we read, you'll find that long form still remains, which is why LinkedIn, and you heard that in the last session as well, is LinkedIn remains more popular simply because it's a little bit longer than 140 characters, right? The posts have context, and the LinkedIn places, you know who wrote it, there's a background of a person that you can get, and so we absolutely believe that's the case. Now, so the question to the audience is, do we feel like there are bloggers out there that are just bloggers? I mean, like for me and John, things are quite different. We came out of this world, so John is not in the world today in the sense of him doing EMR implementations, but my last implementation was last Friday, right? So there's a sense that some folks have that knowledge and they're coming from the ground up, and there's others that cover this area. What do you guys think as influencers? Which one do you like more? I mean, to you, is influence reach or is it knowledge? Obviously, the answer can be both. But what would you say you're looking for more? That, you know, is it reach or is it audience or knowledge that you're looking for? Just anybody. Is it getting time for lunch? That's why you guys are.
I actually think the answer is both. I mean, if you want in-depth knowledge, you may, reach or try and be in connection with one influencer.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want a scan of what's going on out there, then that broader kind of person who has a knowledge of the whole industry is important too.
Right. And the reason why I ask this question is, when you look at this and you say, why do you need influencers? This is becoming very, very important, right? If there's more and more of them out there, if you're trying to contextualize, qualify, vet, etc., you're not looking for reach. You want actual knowledge. So niches within niches are perfectly fine. If you've got a blog that happens to be read by 25 people, but that guy knows DICOM and how it works and where it fails, his knowledge base is far greater than whatever reach you might be able to get elsewhere. And if you get his knowledge, contextualize it, and then post it to another influencer who might have the reach, you're going to get a much better response because you've got proper content now, fully contextualized, properly vetted, etc. So try not to treat each influencer, and again, this seems obvious, but if you treat each influencer as the same, that's already bad. But if you treat the type of influencer, whether it's a knowledge-based influencer versus a reach or amplification, like there are actually influencers that are great at amplification, but they don't really have good reach. And there might be guys who have good reach, but they just don't have the knowledge. Make sure that you figure out which one is which. Use one not against the other, but for the other, and you'll see that your messages start to get promoted a little bit easier. And really, you do want the players in the marketplace, in any case that it might be. That knowledge expert, etc., is very, very important. So this again is key, is that the health IT influencers are a niche, but if you look up in the right-hand side, we don't really, I mean, this is, in general, it's actually a good one if you go to htgroup.com. This is a nice little picture of what it means to be an influencer and what are the driving forces around influencing. But if you look at the new influence aggregators and the influence networks, that's, for example, what John and I started with influencernetworks.com, is it possible for you to take a message that goes to one place, the influence aggregator, and then it gets out everywhere? From a distribution point of view, that's probably valid. So when you're saying I want to distribute something, definitely look at the influence networks and the influence aggregators. But what if you're creating the content? You're trying to contextualize it. You're trying to figure out and ideate. The aggregators and influence networks may not be so great unless they're the style, for example, we talked about Class and Gartner, et cetera, who are pooling together analysts. And in a sense, the analysts working at the marketing research firms are influencers. They may not be well known outside of the analyst firm, but they are influencers in many cases. So be careful as you're starting to look at aggregators and influence networks, even like influencer networks. When you want to distribute, we're actually very good in that network part. But when you don't want to when you don't want to distribute and you want to ideate and other things, it becomes a lot trickier. So now, let's talk a little bit about the motivations of the influencers. And by the way, any of you that are influencers, and anyone with a Twitter follower of 2 is an influencer here, right? It's not, it doesn't matter whether you're 2 or 2,000 or 20,000 or like our keynote speaker yesterday, 185,000. Influence is influence, especially in a niche market. If you influence the right 10 people, that's all that matters. So the little thing at the bottom is, most of you have seen this movie? Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, see this movie right there. So it's not that I'm lazy, it's just that I don't care. Right? And in these cases, there are some influencers that just absolutely don't care. They've grown influence, and at this point, they're at a point where they're just not going to help anyone else out. And there are some of them, most of them are not like that. I mean, they got to the place where they got because they were interactive and shared a lot. So let's talk about why should they care and why would they care. So I want to fill out, again, a little bit on the right-hand side. So we care about people reaching out to us because it either maintains or improves or helps stabilize our integrity. Because as we post content, we talk about people, we interact with people, integrity probably is the most important thing to us. So the panel we led yesterday about paid versus earned media, as an influencer, to me, it's not even a debate. There's no amount of money that you could offer me in which I will trade my integrity for that piece of money. So that you don't ever have to worry that an influencer will not tell you. I mean, you can actually say, it's perfect, at least for me, and I have no problem if somebody says, hey, would you post this if I paid you $1,000? And I will say, normally the answer is no. It's just because in these cases, integrity is far more important than whatever else you might be offering me, which is all the other stuff underneath it. So in many cases, the fear of asking keeps you from getting potential distribution and other things based on the other things we talked about, right? Keep it narrow, keep it qualified, figure out what it is that specifically that you're asking us to do, and you'll be okay. Coupled with integrity, of course, is credibility. If you ask us to write about things that we don't know about, just so we can inflate our SEO numbers or whatever, that's going to affect both our integrity and credibility. So it's perfectly routine. It's perfectly routine for us to be asked to do these kinds of things, but many cases people don't recognize and say, if I ask an influencer to do X, does it help maintain their integrity and credibility? And that's what you saw in yesterday's debate around the paid versus earned media. But really, it's almost like there's no debate at all. These things are just like the journalists. The influencers know how they got to where they got, and there's no trading of these top 2 items. It's just not going to happen. So you don't have to worry about it too much. It's perfectly okay to ask in many cases, and most of us would not be offended if asked. Relevance seems pretty obvious, but it's not as clear as you start to read. So you take a large blog network like a healthcare scene, or a particular blog like mine at healthcare.com. The relevance for a single blog is fairly easy to figure out, because you can actually go there and see, okay, what are they writing about? But relevance for the influencer versus relevance for the influencer's audience might be 2 different things. So like many of us do these days, we might work on, especially with agencies, you work with 5 different companies, 10 different companies. We all have multiple affiliations. So as you're reaching out, if you preface your email or your tweet and say, hey, I know you've worked with influential networks before, I thought this might be cool for you. That's a far more significant way to start a relevant conversation than saying, hey, Shahid, I think you might find this interesting. So preface what you think you've done, which means you've done a little bit of homework. You get a little bit of brownie points for doing that. And then, and I say that not just for the brownie points, but because relevance to me as a blogger that improves my life versus relevance for my audience so I share the content with them are two completely different things. So if your initial work is to help create a relationship with me, right? Let's go back to the why do you need. If you're ideating, qualifying, contextualizing, and then creating here, and you're trying to do all of those 2 or 3 things to set up the relationship with me, which is always a good thing, or any other influencer, it's perfectly okay to focus on relevance to them as a human being first. But if you start going at the bottom, now you're asking to create content, finding distribution venues, looking for distribution, amplification. Now, it's not about me as a person, it's me about my audience. If you help me quantify both of those things, you've just now elevated yourself above everybody else because you thought about me as a person first and said, okay, I do this, and then thought about the other part.
How to find out, like, let's say, okay, if I want you or John to write a blog for me, how should I find out, like, who is your, like, who are, like, in the best reach of you or the Johns, like, how should I decide, like?
Yeah, the best way is to just ask us. I mean, so again, if it's a personal email that says, hey Shahid, I mean, so the easiest way to find out is that you don't even include my name in the thing. I mean, that happens, we get blasts all the time. Most of us get blasts all the time to say, would you, this is great news for you. Like, bullshit, it's not news to me, it's news for you, but it's not for me. Delete, right? So in those cases, a personal email that says, Shahid, I see you run a guy called healthcareguy.com. It seems like you're writing for audience A, B, and C. Is that really your audience? And then I will say, okay, this guy deserves an answer because he's actually asking me a question, not 40 people simultaneously,
Right.
and that's where it's going to get. So we always say, the human to human, ask, right? But ask in a personalized manner that looks like a legitimate email to one of us. Or some of us, some folks answer really well on Twitter, others do it on email. Almost all influencers do end up responding to email. Some may or may not do it on Twitter, but ask, right? I mean, it seems pretty obvious, but like what our parents taught us, if you don't ask, you will never receive.
Yeah, because if there are like 10 bloggers, it's really hard to follow each blogger. Like in day-to-day routine, it's always like we all have like our day-to-day schedule. So like, okay, we can figure out like who is your actual reach. Like if I read all your articles, but I mean that's not possible to follow like 10, 20 bloggers, and that was the reason.
Yeah, so that is a great question. My simple answer to you, again, if John was standing up here to give you a slightly different answer, is my answer is then you don't actually give a crap about me. You gave a crap about you, it's more time for you, therefore you didn't do the work, so you'd rather just send me a blast and hope that I'm going to respond. That's bad news, right? That's just horrible way of thinking in general, but that's how everybody does it. Because they believe they don't have time, it's faster to send out a blast, more likely that it's going to, so it goes on, it's a numbers game. You send it out to 100 influencers, if one of them writes back, you think it's successful. But that's not true. With a little bit of work, you don't have to send it to 100. You just send it to 3 and all 3 of them will respond to you. So in that case, I say, it's okay not to follow us per se, but if you're just about to ask me to do something, you better have done some research, right? A little bit to say, okay, I think this. Maybe I got it wrong. That's perfectly okay. But absolutely under no circumstances should you assume that you can ask someone else to do a favor. I mean, writing any of these could be a favor to you, or it could be my job. I don't know. Depends on which the influencer you're talking about is. But that is the attitude. It's a beautiful question because that's what should be going through your mind is, when I press send, someone on the other end, there's a human being, not a robot, a human being on the other end that has to answer this question. Have I respected him enough and his time enough to be able to answer my question and formulated it in a way that lets him spend the least amount of time possible? I mean, even to me, I'm a little old-fashioned, so I'm going to give you a response. I'm going to say, hello, X. I'm going to put your name in there. I'm going to use proper English, proper diction, grammar, etc. So not everybody will do that, but I personally do that. Which means if I'm going to respect you, I want your respect initiating because you're creating it. And that's a great way to think about it, right? If it's a human that you're going to talk to, wouldn't you? If you're going to ask me a favor right here, you would look me in the eye, you would greet me properly, you wouldn't just push me and say, hey dude, do something for me. But that's what emails are, that's what the tweets are, when that's all you do is you push me and you shove me and you say, hey, do this for me. And then you wonder, a lot of people, not you personally, but a lot of people wonder why I'm not getting attention. It seems obvious, but it's very, very clear. John?
Are you asking though, like, how do you identify the influencers that you care about? Like, so that you know their audience, so you know there are the ones that you want
Okay,
to
let's say I have a very nice topic in my mind. I'm writing an article for it, but I know that I'm not into that space a lot, so maybe it needs little bit touch and then the audience. So as we said before, maybe I can write articles that can reach only 10 people, but at that time if I use influencer, maybe that can reach to thousands of people.
Right.
So let's say now I have that. Now there are so many bloggers out here in the healthcare IT itself. So how could I choose which influencer I can go with?
So
I mean, as he said, time is precious for him, for me. So even if I have to send it to 20 bloggers, yes, I do have that takes time for me as well as for them to reply. So is there any strategy to identify? Okay, let's ask only 2, and maybe that should solve my purpose.
So I would add, if Shahid doesn't mind that, for me, I think there's a couple of things. One is ask your customers, who do you read, and you find out that way, right? So you can learn from them what are the places you read, what are the outlets you look to, and then look to those for your marketing, right? The second, and this is the biggest one for me, and this is how I find most people, is by the 5th time that they've searched for some term that matters to their audience and their community, and they find my site, they say, wait, I have to be there, right? So, for me, it's been very much search engine optimization. It's like, well, if people are finding content through search, and then they find it that way, then they like my site because of that. So the same way, imagine you're your end user, and you search for the things that they're doing. I want an EHR under 5 doctors, right? And see the results that are there, and you'll learn who those influencers are. I think that's a good way. That will give you the start, and then you can reach out to them and say, like you were saying, as a person, say, who is your audience? Can we work together? What are the ways that we work together?
Yeah, and that's great advice. And that's one of the reasons why when we set up influential networks, it was to help solve this problem, because a lot of people have that question. We have that same question, right? As we reach out to folks. That's why you look on this, you see the influence aggregators who are pooling people together. So you can go to these aggregators and say, who are they, and maybe do some keyword searches. I mean, that's awesome advice, is thinking like a customer would, and that finds you the locations. And then you have the influence network. So you could actually come to influencer networks and say, okay, here's what I'm trying to do. This is the goal that I'm trying to achieve. Which are the influencers? And because we know many of them, and this is how influence networks work, we can tell you, go to these 3 and not these 4 for that particular subject. If you came to us with another question that afternoon, we'd give you a different answer because there would be a different set. So influence aggregators and influence networks probably are a good place for you to start, in addition to what John was saying.
And sometimes we say, I don't think there are people that are writing about that. We
Yeah.
had that with someone, she's in the other room, but they came to us, we had a discussion, and we're like, to be honest, we don't know any in that market. So, sorry, so you could either build some more and become, because maybe that's an opportunity for you to be the influencer, or to build up some of your clients as the influencers. Because we looked at across the market, we looked at our connections, and we didn't find it.
Right.
And we're just like, sorry, we're not just going to sell you something, but it doesn't match, right?
Exactly, yeah, and that's a great point. A lot of influencers just aren't there.
And so there is one more question. So let's say, is it always a good idea to come up with a topic and send it to the influencer? Okay, what do you think about this topic? Or I say, okay, I want something. Can you just write something? Which policy can work?
I can't imagine the second one almost ever
I
working,
mean, okay, I
but
have no idea, but I want something to be followed.
that's the key here, right? So now, let's say that you come to, that's how PR agencies, marketing firms, etc. They're the idea folks, right? We're not talking about them, we're talking about influencers who you're trying to, again, if you go back and say, why do you need them? You are now in either ideate. If you're in ideation, and you ask me a quick question, I might give you a quick reply. If you want to sit with me for 4 hours, I send you my price sheet. It's not a problem. I mean, there are ways of getting that. But but then you're not using me as just an influencer. That's a consulting and other engagement. But do go through this, right? Go through this, because the more methodical you are, the more likely you can succeed. Those are terrific questions. Keep going if you guys haven't. So we were talking about why would they care. So maintaining integrity, credibility, absolutely. Relevance is important. Novelty and quality. Novelty in the sense that the kinds of things that you'll see, that John covers pretty well are, the humor marketing that we saw. So that's what we mean by novelty. Is it new? Is it unique in some way? That's likely to get our attention. Of course, that seems obvious, but we get so many of these where we wonder, did they not even read their own email before they press send? It's just weird that it happens so often. Trust. If I've gotten something from you in the past and it's been good, there's a chance that I'm going to do it again. A referral. This is probably the thing that's least used. I'm shocked every day that I get a note from, whether it's a PR agency, whether it's a marketing lead, etc., in which they don't say that they already have a customer, or they already have, that might know me, right, from an influencer perspective, that they either know me, or another influencer that I might know, or another influencer in the network, etc. So testimonials, we know how important they are. A referral is just a tiny testimonial. That's all it is. Use that like all the time. And your subject line should say, John then sent me to Shahid. I mean, that's going to get read. It absolutely will get read, in addition to the hundreds of other influencers that I follow. So if you're going to take away one thing from this topic, take that, right? Abuse referrals, because that's what's going to get your email open if you need it. Availability. This is really tricky. I get, on a monthly basis, probably about half a dozen to a dozen emails in which somebody's going to send me a note. I'll give you a perfect example. I won't name the vendor, but Analyst X has just finished a report about how important mobile apps are in the healthcare industry. Would you be willing to write about this? So I say, hey, all right, seems like an interesting article. Go ahead and send me the report, and I'd be happy to read it and see if it's worth writing about. Oh, sorry, we can't send you the report because it's a private report. Like, what the hell? You asking me to do you a favor about a product that you want me to talk about, and you don't want me to see the product? Are you insane? Right? And this is not uncommon. It's very common for you to give me an article behind a paywall. What the hell? Why would you ask me to register for something? Like, where you just released this great white paper, please register for it and you'll receive it. Are you insane? You're asking me to review something, attach the damn thing in the email. That's what we say. So availability, it's just one of those things where you don't think about it. You're like, oh yeah, I'll just send this to them. They must not be doing anything. You're just sitting there hoping that we're going to respond to them. It's not going to happen. So make sure that whatever it is that you're doing is available. And then of course, saving them time. This is actually surprising to many people. Is we want guest articles, we want posts, we want things, because it helps us save time, because we like to be useful to our audiences, etc. And when we get something, it saves us time. But if we have to touch it up, edit it, change it around, etc., that's not saving us time. So when you look at all of these, if you look at it as a group, it's all about that one at the bottom. It's just about the saving time. So can you guys think of anything else about why you've reached out to influencers successfully and they've done it? What motivations might they have had? Nobody's motivated for you guys? Did I actually do a brilliant job and there's nothing else to add here? That can't be. All right, so if you guys think of anything, definitely do it. Now, let's talk a little bit about how influencing is actually just trading favors. I mean, in person, we don't think about it, right? As we talk to each other, it's not really clear that we're doing each other favors. When I talk to you and you talk to somebody else about it, you're actually doing me a favor. We just don't think about that. So before asking to do a favor, give one first. And it seems like an obvious thing, but if you've reached out to me and you know that I have a blog and you've never shared any of my content, my thought is, what the hell, right? You're asking me to do something. do it as a response to something that you've done for me. It's a good way to build that relationship, build that rapport. Remember that we said that if you're going to walk through this chain of ideating to qualifying to potentializing to creating, how can you do that if you don't give favors first? So this one, I'm hoping for some really good ideas from the audience about sharing content first, tweeting and posting their links, leaving comments on their blogs, leaving a message on Facebook, Google+, and LinkedIn, researching whether they allow guest postings, and then submitting something like, on my blog I love guest postings that match specifically to my audience, starting the social media conversations. What other favors do you think influencers like that you guys would suggest to others?
Excerpting pieces of their content or your content on your blog.
Great.
In the same vein, what I like is finding a blog post and asking for their, you can link to their post, but instead asking for their permission to use their content.
Perfect. Yeah, so what's interesting about that question is when you ask and say, may I, one, it shows respect. Two, you've established a rapport now because there's a human-to-human contact. It wasn't a blast email. And third, you're making it feel so important to me that you would ask permission to do it. It's a perfect example of how to do all three in one fell swoop to add that respect that one would need. Other things?
Well, just a little piece on that last one is it's nice also to, once you've put it up, to just follow up and say, here's a link to the post on my site.
Oh, that's a great point.
What did she say?
She said pointing out a link that they, like if you excerpt somebody else's blog and put it on your own, send them the note to say that you've done that. Because in many cases, like John said, we're stat whores and we know that something has been posted elsewhere, but sometimes we'll miss it, and that's a great point, is pointing explicitly, pointing out explicitly to the influencer.
And then the one other thing about asking permission for content, I always do that, and nobody ever tells you no.
Yes.
They tell you yes. But then also, be sure that you say, I'm also going to link back to your site, and I'm going to have a link back to your name, wherever your bio is on your site or whatever. Help support them. And the final thing is you probably actually also have to let them know what comments on their stuff end up on your site, because they're probably not coming to your site.
Great point. Yeah, like John published one of my articles last month, and he got some comments on his site, but then he sent it to me, right? Because I wasn't paying attention to all the comments on his site. So that's actually very good, because once you take someone's content, you've now started a conversation somewhere else. Do keep them in the loop so that then when we come back and say thank you to that person about that note, then of course once you comment, it'll stay in your stream. So it'll be a lot easier. That's great. Other advice that you would give? How do you do a favor first?
I just did it. I called you an entrepreneurship expert on LinkedIn.
Oh, there you go. That is awesome. Yeah, give me a cool title. Other ways to do favors? So as you can see, these human-to-human interactions, the ones that we do every day in person, have their analogies online. So now, just some quick ways is how can we do the influencing? Now, this is where, so when we started Influential Networks, we did it around being an aggregator, an influence aggregator, so that we could be a one-stop shop. But really, it was more initially to not be a true business as much as just helping out our fellow bloggers as how we started it. Not influencer probably is a more newer term about that. So if you think about it, there are a lot of influencers that don't actually know that they're influencers. So how are they going to influence if they don't actually know that they're influencers? They think, oh, I'm just blogging. They don't. So like you just did, elevating them a little bit to say, yeah, you are an influencer, and here's how. You are influencing my customer in the way John said, hey, you found person so-and-so. Like Brian A here does this really well. He covers a lot of people routinely. He absolutely knows he's an influencer. But there are a lot of guys who start out that don't know that they are truly influencing. So we actually started this to say, okay, when you're talking about somebody at a conference, that is an influence. So how could you influence me to talk about your customer or your client at a conference? That's worth thinking about, again, going through that first slide and saying, how am I going to walk through each one of those? Writing a blog post is an obvious one. Tweeting or sharing about you, and again, in this case, the you could be the influencer or the customer or the audience. A newer thing, of course, is like you saw today, showing up in a video. Guest posting on their site allows you to say they could write white papers and other things. Again, white papers, people almost have no problem paying for that, right? That earned media versus paid media doesn't even come up for white papers because it's long form, very, very expensive normally to create, expensive in the sense of time and as well as effort. So hire them. If you want something from them, hire them. And what I love is my customers, typically anyone, so I'm an expert in a number of my areas, and when they ask me to write a white paper, the only way I say yes is, sure, if it's not ghostwritten and it's under my brand. It's the only reason I would do it. I have no other reason to do it. So anything else you guys would add here? How to influence? Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
We're looking at the audience, I don't know if you just talked about in the presentation. This idea of being influential actually goes back to the 40s, 1940s. Gallup has been studying this phenomenon, for since 1940s. And there's a great book out there called Influential. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. Just probably read it. And their definition of influential is that person that the 1 in 10 that influences the other 9, whether it be how they think politically, how they vote, what they read, so on and so on. And so, that question that you brought up about you may not know you're an influencer, the person in your companies, look to your staff or your CL who are the influencers in your company. Who are the people who are influencing, or are the people that think that they're people that should be engaged in this conversation because they're already influencers. And the idea behind being influential or being an influencer is that you're naturally born to want to share what you think, what you know. You're naturally born to collaborate and to connect with people. So you probably have somebody on your staff who is influencing, and if that person is like that, you recognize this characteristic. There are people that just have, be out on Twitter, in social media because they don't perceive themselves as an influencer, but they are influential based on that very basic definition.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And in fact, it's one thing to reach out to influencers and a whole other to build them, right? If you need an influencer, build your own. It's not, not easy and it's not quick, but definitely is possible. So I'm happy to talk about this at lunch. There's a couple more things I just want to cover here real quick. Is there anything else that you guys want to add? I want to share this, by the way. It'll go up on our site and make sure you guys have this because this is that's the output of a workshop is something that you guys can use at the end of it. So the last one here is extending authority through, and that's why I said that because there's a lot of ways for an influencer to extend their authority throughout the different means. So help them figure out if you see someone, they're like, hey, they could be an influential, like Carol was saying, but they're not really, they're not acting like that. Let's go help them. We can build them and do that. That's really one of the reasons why John and I reach out is that, hey, did you know you're influencing all of this, but you're not doing X, Y, and Z? Let's put this in a bounding box and make that happen. Last couple of things is just a few don'ts, and don't stalk and talk instead, right? I mean, this is the key thing is that if you just instead of sending out 1,000 emails, I'm going to send out only 10 to influencers, but it still looks like a marketing message that doesn't help out much. In many cases, you say you're a person I trust. This happens obviously in LinkedIn all the time, but we've never met, we've never been at a conference, we've never seen each other. That's pretending, right? It's better to say, dude, we don't know each other at all. You don't trust me, I don't trust you. Are you lying to me for? We don't trust each other. Tell me what it is that you're asking for, and then I'll network with you, right? I see that you did X. I'd love to stay in touch with you because I want to share some posts with you. I want to do this with you, that with you. That's great, right? That's what I mean. Don't pretend. Relate to me instead. And the last thing is probably the most important is don't assume influence simply by whether it's reach, whether it's that N of one problem, etc. You know, being connected is not necessarily influence. Most high school students are better connected than we are. Does that mean that they influence? Maybe. Probably not for our audience, but that doesn't mean that they're influencers, right? So this idea of influencers the idea itself is not new, but the idea that a blogger or someone who happens to be an expert in their field automatically becomes an influencer certainly is. And that's really why you want to make sure that you cover this. So did you guys like this format, the workshop-ish format? Yeah? All right, good. So we'll do this again in the future. So again, we'll make sure that you guys can share this. But I want to thank you for your time, and we're going to lunch now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's give a Shahid. You guys got to do my intro, right?